This is the Lifestyle Builders Podcast, show 75, Family, Finances, and Full-Time Entrepreneurship with PT and Teresa Taylor.
In the meantime, I was like 34 or 36 weeks pregnant with our second. So our oldest was not quite 2. I'm super pregnant. And I'm like, that is another terrible idea. So like, why would you like PT money is doing fine. And you want to get a bunch of like internet people together. Like, I don't understand what's going on.
Hi, Ariana here with a quick PSA about why this topic is so important to us. Tom and I know how challenging it can be to start and run a business, to take care of your loved ones, and on top of it all, to keep a healthy relationship with your spouse. It isn't easy, and that is why we created our Lifestyle Builders Mentorship Program. As a special offer during this very special Couples and Entrepreneurship Month, we'd like to invite you to get started with your first month of Lifestyle Builders for only $1. So if you, and your spouse is welcome too, need more strategy, support, and guidance in your business and life, plus people who truly care about you and will keep you accountable, sign up now at tomandariana.com/LBcouples with the code LBcouples. A little bit more about our guests before we dive into today's show. Philip and Teresa Taylor live in Frisco, Texas with their 3 young children. Philip is a CPA, blogger, podcaster, and the entrepreneur behind FinCon, the industry-leading event and community hub for personal finance media influencers. Teresa is a former special education teacher with a master's degree in adaptive PE. She currently supports Philip in his work and also runs the Taylor household on a full-time basis. All right. We had a great time with PT and Teresa, and it was her first podcast episode ever, and she rocked it.
I was going to say, we've had like 7 people that it's been their first podcast, but yeah, I agree. She did really
a lot
good.
Of the spouses that were either pulled into being entrepreneurs or are not entrepreneurs, it was their first time being on, but I love that they agreed to come on, and I'm so pumped that they rocked it out.
Well, I think a lot of the non-entrepreneur spouses have a lot to say. Like, they've got to put up with people like us, so like there's so much gold, I think, coming from those non-entrepreneurs, and this episode's a great example of that.
Yeah, and with PT and Teresa, it was nice. There's the dog. It was nice to jump in and talk about the money stuff a little bit too, because that is a big focus in their life, with him being so involved in the money stuff, being a CPA and then doing the blogging for PT Money. And it was interesting to just kind of see how they were both very frugal, but she called herself the more frugal one, and she was a little bit more risk averse, which I think a lot of us out there can relate to that. I'm a very risk averse person as well.
Well, I was going to say, and the good thing we got into here, if you guys are trying to make that transition from, having it, as they said, as a hobby to then turning it into a full-time, entrepreneurship, we actually walk through what that looked like from both perspectives. And I think that's going to give some really good insight to, people that are in that situation.
Yeah. And with that, we'll let you enjoy. Hey, everyone. We are back with another couple for our Couples in Entrepreneurship series. Today, we've got PT and Teresa Taylor. Hey guys, what's going on?
Hey, we're excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Absolutely.
And as you guys heard in their introduction, PT is the money guy, and his conference is the Money Conference. FinCon is coming up soon. So we're really excited to dive into some of this stuff with you guys around what it was like for you to take that leap into entrepreneurship. Give us a little background of like what that looked like for you leading up to when you finally did take the leap.
Yeah, so in my previous career, I was a CPA in in public accounting, doing some internal auditing as well. So just kind of corporate accounting life. Did that for 10 years, and just found myself really semi-unsatisfied with that career. I just didn't feel passionate about it or like it was going somewhere. My dad was a CPA as well, had his own practice. That wasn't something I wanted to pursue, and so I thought there was something else out there waiting for me. I just hadn't found it yet. And I discovered personal finance blogs in about 2003, 2004, and it just changed my world. I really just dove into getting serious about my money. And then, of course, I was meeting Teresa at the same time, and so that really triggered, the idea of getting married and starting a family really triggered a lot of financial focus for me. Not to mention the woman I'd met was super frugal and with money herself. And so it just sort of came together. So we started working on our money, and then ultimately it led me to start the blog PT Money on the side. And then that 3 years later became the full-time venture. And yeah, I'd love to get into kind of how we, navigated that leap.
Yeah, well, because, part of it too, like for people listening, I was the entrepreneur. Ariana wanted nothing to do with it. So I was kind of out doing my ventures. And then I remember we had, a couple conversations like, well, what would it mean if we could leave? And Ariana left her job first, and then I left mine. But we had to have a lot of conversations, not only about like the fears and the risks and everything else, but what a lot of people don't talk about is getting your personal finances in order, because there's different costs like after you leave a job, and even like getting used to like going from a paycheck to now you're managing your own money in the business, and it's different than the personal money. Mm-hmm. So obviously there's a lot to dive into, but I'm curious, Teresa, what did it look like as PT was kind of going out, doing this PT Money blog? It started taking off, and then the conversations came up around, hey, can we do this full time?
Yeah, I was not a fan of jumping into this full time. The blog was for sure a hobby, and it started as a way for us to track our finances and to get ahead. We had just gotten married. We paid for our wedding. We put it all on one credit card that was 0% financing and due by December after we got married in June. I don't like to spend money. I look for, I don't want to say I'm cheap, but it's possible that I am like looking for the best deal. And so this blog was great because, we could track all of this. Well, we had just paid off our credit card. And for me, we needed to pay it off a month before it was due because I'm probably like one of the most risk averse people on the planet. So I'm one step away from maybe like putting our money under our mattress. So it never really occurred to me that he would leave his good corporate job where we got to travel with it. He would go overseas for about 3 weeks at a time. And as a young married couple, that was really appealing. And I'm a former special education teacher. I'm home right now with our 3 kids. But getting to go do that on summer breaks and vacations was really appealing. So it did not occur to me that we would ever drop that. And I even kind of thought, I'll stay working too because I kind of feel like special education is my calling. But, it just it took off. We had kids, more kids, and then it worked out.
Now, we've got an interesting story about how we eventually made the leap, so we definitely want to share that. But just in those early years, it was just really mostly a hobby. But then it started paying the mortgage, and it was like, whoa, for me, it was like, this could be my thing, but I'm super conservative like Teresa as well financially. And so it was something that I didn't allow that thought to really creep in too much because I just needed that security of that corporate job, that almost 6-figure salary. And we were just crushing all our financial goals because we were both working at the time. So it was like, why interrupt like this perfect thing with this leap when it feels like it's just a little too early, but something pushed us to make the leap a little earlier and we were comfortable with.
Well, and I'll say too, we started living off of my paycheck pretty early in our marriage. We wanted to pay off all of our debt. It was very important to us to be as debt-free as possible, paying back both of our school loans, having no car payments. So being the teacher, I made a little bit less than the corporate gig, but still sufficient. So we lived off of my paycheck and we used his for saving, retirement, investing, all of that, saving up for a house, putting the 20% down, doing all that. And I don't know, we had to get all those ducks in a row. And then I guess the big leap was eventually, fast forward, we had a baby and I was working on my master's full time. So we and Philip was still working in audit. And then they were going to send him for 3 weeks over her first birthday overseas. And we weren't going to be able to go. And although he was still doing the corporate Monday through Friday scene, we still had a lot of flexibility, it felt like. And then it just wasn't really what we pictured for our family. Him overseas, us not being able to go. And I think it was just divine intervention, or I would have never said, let's do it. But it was like, let's try it now and see what happens.
Yep. So I might have used that as an excuse to make the leap a little early.
Yeah, but I think sometimes it takes that one thing. Like you're comfortable, you're good, life is good, and then all of a sudden it's just that one thing that happens that makes you take a step back and really look at your life. And that little tiny thing is like, oh, I don't have as much freedom as I thought I did, and I don't have as much freedom as we wanted. So I think sometimes that's all it takes is for your brain to start thinking about things differently and to start looking at things differently for those other possibilities to become, hey, this is really, we could totally do this. And the reason why is because we don't want that to ever happen again.
Well, and I think what's important too is that we're all, especially if we're risk averse, we're all always waiting for like the perfect moment.
I'm so risk averse.
I think what we found from talking to so many people is that there's never the perfect moment. So it always takes something to push us. Like when Ariana left, it was when our daughter was born. And then a lot of when I left, I was, 6-figure salary, but I was traveling 4 to 5 days a week. And as we had our son, I'm like, this wasn't that life that we talked about and pictured.
And I did not have the life I ever pictured because I was a miserable stay-at-home mom with 2 kids while he was traveling
and no
4 days a week.
Yeah.
And he was an infant and he didn't sleep until he was 14 months old.
Yikes.
And he had ear infections. He was sick all the time. So I was just like a walking zombie mom. And, we kind of had to take a step back and be like, this is not what we wanted. What are we doing?
Well, and what was cool, I think, was we had, years before kind of gotten good at like goal planning and talking about our future. And we were taking the steps to get there. And then we got to a point where it was like, we're still on the path, but there's like another year before we're really where we want to be. But then we looked at our finances and we said, if we make these couple tweaks, we can do it right now. And I think that was a big moment for us because we were always like, follow the plan. And then we saw, well, just with a couple of tweaks to the plan, we can have that now, which was amazing.
Yep. It's funny how if you start moving toward what you want, you might find yourself being able to pull that lever a little quicker. And that was kind of the case for us. Yeah, we had spent the previous 3 years, like Teresa said, living on one income, banking the rest, or using it to pay down debt. And so we were in a pretty good decision, even though my income from my blog had only replaced about, I'd say, about a third of my corporate income. And then now she was back in school. So we were really having to live lean to make that jump. But we just decided that we had given ourselves enough savings runway. I'm a CPA, and so I felt somewhat comfortable, like if I really ultimately needed to go back and get another job, I could probably do it or just do taxes. And then I picked up a bunch of freelancing jobs. I picked up a blog editor job on the side. So we just decided that at that point we're going to make it work, and we really pulled down some of the expenses. We, like I said, tried to look for ways to bring in extra income. So we just were at that point. We decided to kind of do whatever it took,
And I will say too that probably 4 or 5 months earlier, Philip we were on a date night, and rare date night with the baby at home, and going to a friend's birthday party, and he kind of casually drops in the like, I think I might one day, maybe pretty soon, like to try this full time. And I was ticked. I'm like, how could you bring this up? We're going to a party, like trying to have fun. And like, you basically, that is not in the plan. And we legitimately like sat down as newlyweds, like dorked out with the timeline, like when we were going to like buy a house, have kids, what we were going to pay off. And it was kind of a running joke for a while, and we have kept it, and it's like in our safe, like with our documents, like mainly at this point just because it's funny, but it was just like, that's kind of who we were early on. And I was still like, that's a terrible idea. You should never do your job. And then flash forward, November to February, and it's like, okay, I guess we do this now or we don't do it. So
yeah.
So PT, when you went to approach that, what were you thinking? Because like we had a similar thing. Like people would call us the married couple in college.
Yeah, we totally had a 5-year plan.
And we had a 5-year plan of like when we're going to graduate, when we're going to buy a house. And what I started doing all along the way was like bucking the plan. And every time I did that, like I proposed a year before I was supposed to like propose.
Yep.
And every time I did that, it would totally throw her off. And especially when it got like, because that was obviously a good one. But when it got to like having the conversation about like, well, hey, maybe I can leave my job. I know I went in with a very different thought because I was the sole, provider at that point. And so bringing that conversation up, especially when it got into the money space, was just more difficult than I think the other conversations.
He had done it multiple times before though too, because he wanted to, when we bought our first house, he tried to get me to buy a duplex and become landlords. And I was like, no, what are you, crazy?
I'm like, how can we reduce our expenses so that we can get there faster?
So he has done that multiple times. So I would love to know what you were thinking kind of going into that conversation.
It's that entrepreneur brain.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of always thinking about the next idea. I'm a planner as well, and I appreciated the structure to a degree. And it was fun to plan out our life. But what's important to focus on, especially as an entrepreneur, you can sometimes get caught up in the numbers and seeing if it will work financially. And that's important. I don't want to discount that. But in terms of selling the dream, sometimes it's important to talk about like what the new lifestyle or what your new approach or the change can then afford you. And so start with the conversation on like the top end of the hierarchy, and talk about sort of, the aspirational aspects of making the move and plant those seeds. And don't feel like, certainly don't feel like you need to make the decision right away, but plant the seed and then start brewing on it and thinking on it. And if it's something you really want or you want to move toward, then I've found that kind of life will just kind of have a way of pushing you that way.
Mm-hmm. And maybe don't approach it on date night.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That was a bad move on my part.
And your baby's only like 7 months old. You're not really sleeping. And, in school. So I might have not been the best frame of mind.
Make sure your spouse is also in functional, brain mode.
I could have probably responded better, but,
It's funny. I started FinCon in a similar way. We're laying down at bed late at night, getting to bed late, 11:30 or something. Jumped into bed and I don't know what we're doing, but we're just going to sleep, I guess. And I was like, this FinCon idea keeps popping up. And I kept talking to her about it and in bed that night. And she's just like, get out of bed, let me go to sleep and go start the darn thing.
That was another situation where we had just dealt with some family that had a health issue that needed us to kind of care for them. In the meantime, I was like 34 or 36 weeks pregnant with our second. So our oldest was not quite 2. I'm super pregnant. And I'm like, that is another terrible idea. So like, why would you like PT money is doing fine. And you want to get a bunch of like internet people together? Like, I don't understand what's going on. And so kind of the joke is like, throw me an idea, and if I shoot it down in like 5 to 10 seconds, it's probably a winner. I cannot.
I'm totally stealing that.
Right. So I can't really.
She's chief naysayer. That's
right.
For sure.
I'm a no person. Like, no, we're not. That's terrible.
But if I can work it through that filter, I think it's a real good idea,
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny. We didn't realize this until we were actually on another podcast, but every time we had a child, we started another business.
Yep.
And like, that's probably the worst time to start another business. But I think there's something about like going through, and I don't know if it's like a father thing or what, but realizing you're going to go through another change. And it's like, I need to take care of things. But it's just interesting to hear how it seems like a lot of people start businesses at like the worst times.
Yeah.
It was definitely in the mix for us. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's been a whirlwind. So thinking back on those moments for sure. I agree. Well,
and you know what? So we were talking about like buying the duplex, and we're in the middle of writing our book right now. And I went back to some old blog posts to kind of see what was I talking about at the time when all this was going on. And I kept trying to get her into this duplex idea, and she didn't want to do it. And then I'm like, well, we bought our single family to live in. And I said, well, what if we just buy an investment property? She wanted nothing to do with it. And the change that came was when I stopped talking about the money and we started talking about what it was we wanted our lives to look like. And I remember, and I actually blogged about it, which I'm glad I did, but I remember the specific conversation where it was like, it's no longer about how much money we can make or how many houses we buy, but it's like, this will allow you to be able to stay home when we have our daughter. And it was like, once we tied it to that, like everything else became so much easier. But prior to that, I kept talking about like what I wanted to do. And as entrepreneurs, we get so excited. And that was a big kind of groundbreaking moment for me when it was like, stop talking about what you want to do and start talking and asking about like why, what's important.
Mm-hmm.
That's
well, and I think too, assuming your spouse is going to be on board with things when they have absolutely no clue what you're talking about. Like I was not into the entrepreneurial or business world at all. So just some of these concepts and some of these ideas were completely foreign to me. So I don't know what he was expecting me to do. Like, oh yes, this sounds exciting and great. Yay. But it was immediately, it's change. It's different. It's something I don't understand.
That was how it looked in my head.
Of course it did. I wasn't comfortable with it. So I had that like those defense walls up automatically when he would start talking about things. But what he eventually learned to do was talk to me about possibilities, about opportunities, about things that while they may be a change or they may be different, also give us open doors to other things that might be able to happen in our lives. So instead of always coming with new ideas or like, hey, this new concept, it's I've got an idea that might be a really big opportunity. You know, like wording it differently, kind of framing it up for me made a huge difference in my reaction after he finished telling me what it was about. And I stopped being such as one of our spouses on the podcast called it, such a dream killer, and started to just kind of listen first before I had my reaction or before I let myself say the first sentence out of my mouth.
Yeah, this is like free marriage counseling. Thank you. And even listening to some of your previous podcasts, I was kind of picking up on that a little bit, just maybe in a way that like, okay, he's working so hard. He's, okay, great. We're doing fine. Like, we're just fine. And I'm like kind of a person that's like, I'm comfortable being mediocre. Like, I don't know if that's allowed to say to like.
Totally allowed.
But we are in a good spot. Like, it's great, but then he wants to like take it to the next level and, let's
10X baby,
10X it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. Like, but then it's like one of his taglines in his blog is like saving to give. And I think you had like an ebook on that maybe too. Maybe may or may not have looked at that a few years ago, but just like, okay, well, the more we do, it's not like just for our gain, but it's like to help our family, like to help our community. Like, so I think kind of reframing it that way also, it's like the way, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, like just to kind of get me on board and not be like, oh, cool, you're playing on the internet again, which like is a joke. Like was maybe not a joke initially when I said it, but it is now. When you walk in and like your entrepreneur husband is on Facebook and he's like, I'm doing ads or, and I'm like, oh, sorry to interrupt Facebook. Had a quick question about dinner, so it's good.
I love that though, because I think that's an important thing to talk about too, is everyone thinks that you have to be striving for big things and you have to be going for better things all the time. But even for us, like I told Tom, when we get to that number that we've said is a comfortable point for us, I would be completely fine staying at that number. But because of the person that he is and the types of things that he wants to do, I know that that's probably unlikely. But I know for me, that's the type of lifestyle that we're aiming for. So once we hit that spot, I'm good. If we go beyond, that's when it's like, okay, yes, now we can impact other people. We can make a change in our community. We can make other people's lives better because we can give, we can start a charity, whatever that might look like. So I think for me, it was becoming comfortable with like, yeah, we could be mediocre or we could stay comfortable and we would be okay. Like it would be a good life. Our kids would have a good life. But I think also being okay with if it goes beyond, what are some of those things that are valuable to you, or what are some of those things that you would want to do and help others do so that it's okay, like you're reframing it in your mind, like, okay, well, we make more than I ever thought we would, but we're going to live at this level and we're going to use the rest for good.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point too, because obviously you can have goals and obviously you're different people. Like we're very different people. And, you know, part of what we figured out is that we're each playing certain roles. And even when we get to that point, like, you know, part of my drive is probably similar to you, PT, to be able to then just help and impact so many people. And like you do that through FinCon. I mean, being able to go last year, looking forward to going this year, but just seeing the bigger impact beyond you guys, like that's what drives me. So what's cool is that for every evolution we get to in our business, we can each then kind of define the roles we play and what we do or don't do.
And life too, I think.
Yeah. So I'm curious now, fast forward, not only do you have PT Money, you've left, now you've got kind of FinCon going on, this big event. How do you guys, you know, balance those roles between personal life, between business and all of that?
It's been a challenge. Just from a real tactical standpoint, running two businesses is tough, but I separate myself physically. So I have a home office, which we're in right now, that I work Mondays and Fridays, typically on PT Money. And so I work from home, do my thing here. And then 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I go into a co-working space and work with Jessica, my event planner, on FinCon. And so having that separate space, different computers, different setups, just puts me in that different frame of mind. So in terms of running two businesses, that kind of helps me keep that straight. In terms of keeping that in balance with the household, one of the things we've stuck with that Teresa's really a stickler on is 5:30 dinner or 6 o'clock dinner. So regardless of what I've done that day, what I have going on, for the most part, 90% of the time, I'm home for that dinner. And that's one of the awesome things that we've got like lock solid in our family. She's real big on, we can talk about why that's important to you, but that's something that's held me accountable and helped to kind of create some structure for our life.
I think number one, because we can, like lifestyle builders, we have this privilege to like build a life we want, and we're not doing it perfect. And like we said, I'm probably the more rigid one. So like, I would prefer that he had like a schedule and that I could see it every day, not to be micromanaging, but like, so I could like make sure our life is like working around that. Like, okay, so you're home at whatever time, we're going to eat here, and then let's do our night stuff, and, you know, work and seeps into that in the evening. And after the kids go to bed, like this is a, you know, high stress time preparing for FinCon and all that. And so I kind of could use to be a little more tolerant and patient since he is actually working. But
not just playing on Facebook.
Right.
Sometimes
maybe. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah. So the dinners have been great. Also, we drop the kids off at church on Wednesday nights, and we can go for a date night. So if we stick to that, stick to the dinner thing, if it feels like for me that creates like just enough structure to kind of give me balance in my life. But we're by no means perfect. I'm kind of an unstructured person in general. Like I like to just kind of wake up when I wake up and let my day kind of come to me. That's weird to say for someone who's got as much going on as I do, but so I'm not perfect in that regard. So we're a work in progress with regard to that. I mean, I've created this freedom for us. And so for me personally, I like to just sort of hang out in that freedom and not have restrictions or not have guidelines for my life. But I know ultimately if I want to do bigger, greater things and have a more fulfilled life, that I do need some of that in place. And then I have control over that. It's not that I'm losing control again. It's just I'm the one in control. But that takes another muscle. You know, when you spent the previous 10 years of your career letting someone else sort of dictate what you do with your life, and then having to do that all yourself at the same time running businesses is very challenging. So that's something I'm still working on that muscle. Teresa's good, like I said, about a couple of the key markers, which I think is important to have in your life. But
well, and our kids they go to school. The girls are in an elementary school. So I am living in fear of the tardy. So otherwise, like I would not wake up at 5:30, 5:45 every morning, like if we did not have to go to school, you know. So I think for me, there's that. And then like him waking up at 8:30 and I'm like, okie dokie. Life start. Like I've had an entire life.
But just to clarify, PT is bedtime guy. So I do the baths at night for the most part and put the kids in bed. So we're trading roles in that way.
We do tag team pretty well. Yeah. We have a good system for us that I guess I don't realize is unique to a lot of families, maybe with him home almost every night, you know, early-ish, or he is here. And if he's here when the kids get home from school, it's like he has these, you know, window French doors that don't hide sound or like faces right up against it. So he gets interrupted pretty frequently. So then he does, and he's a night owl, so he'll stay up late working after we tag team, mainly him putting the kids to bed and all that. So
I'm curious to hear how you guys are doing that.
We actually do a little bit of the tag teaming as well. So our daughter is in first grade and our son goes to full-time daycare, sort of preschool, which is nice, but it's in a different place than her school. So we swap back and forth. If one of us takes him in the morning to daycare, the other one gets our daughter on the bus. And then in the afternoon, it's swapped because we are working from home. Usually we're both working from home. Occasionally we'll go off to like I like to go to the library to work, or we'll go to Panera or anything like that. But usually it's kind of planned around, okay, well, the kids are going to be home. So either I have the car with the car seat and I'm just going to go right from the coffee shop and pick him up. And we have a family calendar, but it's like got like 12 calendars on it because that's where we keep track of everything. So we have it all color coded. And
is that in Google?
Yep.
Yeah, we use Google Calendars. So Tom has his own calendar he shared with me. I have a calendar that I've shared with him. The kids each have their own calendar. We have a family calendar, and then each business has its own calendar. And then for the business that we're in together, that actually has 3 calendars because it's him by himself, me by myself, or us together.
And this sounds like chaos.
It does.
But what it allows us to do is that when we plan out our week, we do all the family stuff first. Like, so we have dinner slotted out just like you guys do. And PT, I love what you said. Like, you guys are still a work in progress. I think we're always going to have like a work in progress label on us because we're always trying to make it better. But what that allows us to do is to put what's important first, and then we squeeze the business in. And our daughter actually just went back to school after her first summer of being home. And there's always that kind of time balance and figuring out schedules. And I think what I realized is that it's actually nice having school because it gives us more structure than we have otherwise. But like I'm the morning guy. So Ariana, like you do not want to wake her up in the morning. So I'll get up with the kids. I'll do my morning routine. And that's my time with them. And then, we'll get up, we'll do our thing, but then she's off in the one at night. So we each kind of get our own time with the kids when it's good for us. And we figured out like how we can make it all work so that we each kind of, thrive in the area that we're in.
Yeah, I'm the night owl. So I'm usually the one staying up, and like the kids have gone to bed, and sometimes Tom has even gone to bed, and I'll stay up and it's kind of my like me time because I'm not a morning person. And I know there's a ton of people out there that are like, oh, you should just wake up an hour before your kids. And I'm like, if I wake up an hour before the kids, they're going to know. And 5 minutes later, I'm going to hear the door and they'll be like, I'm awake because we've done that before. And like, they just somehow know. It's insane. But then I'm also not fun to be around. So I don't want to be up with the kids if I'm miserable, and I've tried the waking up early. I have been a bad morning person since high school. Like it's just never been my thing. So I've given up on that. I have an alarm to help get ready in the morning if we got to do bus and all that. But otherwise I try to sleep in a little bit later, and he does the mornings with the kids, and vice versa at night. A lot of times if we've got different things going on, if he's got a random call in the evenings, I'm always the one taking, like, okay, well, I'll get them ready and then we'll just come and give you kisses and go to bed.
Filling in the gaps.
Yes. Yeah. And it's always talking about it too, because that's evolved. It hasn't always been like that. But as soon as he started working from home, I was like, I don't have to do all these things by myself anymore. I have help. So it was talking about like, okay, well, how are we going to tag team? What works, what doesn't work? And if we get to the point where something's just not working, how do we adjust and shift that so that it's better for everyone involved?
Yeah.
I think it's a little tricky, in my opinion, because I'm not working full-time on 1 or 2 businesses. So I am managing the home, and I want to do that well. So occasionally, like, I'll feel guilty, but then I'll also think like, well, he's got all this time he owns this time. But, there are things like calls and, podcasts and other issues, meetings and things that he does have. So it is, it's been really important for us to sit and look at our calendars. And sometimes we're just too tired on Saturday or Sunday to even like both sit on the couch with our computers open or phones and look at the calendar. But if we can do that, it saves so much frustration throughout the week. And
Yeah, one of the things we did, we have a daily meeting just to sync up in the morning on schedules, what's going on, what do you need from me, what do I need from you, and then we have a weekly meeting, and we actually shifted it to Wednesdays. So Wednesdays, we get together and we reflect on the last week, we plan out the upcoming week, and then what that's allowed us to do is not have to like be at the end of the week and trying to plan it, or at the beginning of the week and trying
and
to
also
plan
it's
it.
in the middle of the day, so we're not trying at the end of the day, because I just
When you're worn out.
usually my brain is like, no, I don't want to have to think about things.
But like when
anymore.
we don't do that meeting, like we can feel it because we're
Mhm.
not aligned on things. Like we miss stuff. So that's been kind of like, I would say like the heartbeat that kind of keeps everything going for us.
Huh, midweek. I've never heard of that, but I might have to try that.
We actually
Well-
had someone else talk about they were doing virtual like lunch dates with their spouse. So he was at work and she was at work, and they would sit at their desks and do like a virtual Zoom chat with each other. And that's when they would have like their talk about scheduling, family stuff, money stuff. So it was in the middle of the day. Neither of them was tired yet at night. And it was like more of a, because they were out of the norm. They weren't at home sitting on the
Mhm.
couch. So they were able to have a lot of those conversations and more productive conversations that way. And I was like, that's kind of interesting. That's a cool idea.
Well, I was gonna say, like, it's funny. I've taken a lot of the stuff from like my corporate consulting days and brought it home. So like a lot of businesses, like we used to do planning at the end of the year, but like that's the worst time. You got holidays and everything else.
Usually we're
So
sick.
we shifted our planning to the middle of the year. So now it's in like June when we don't really have a ton going on yet. So as much as we can, we try to do things in the middle of it. So that way it's not on the beginning or end. And it's a little bit of a shift, I think,
was a
early on,
shift,
but
yeah.
it definitely helped.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you guys, obviously you were frugal, you had saved up money, but given your background, as other people are trying to take that leap and leave their job to go full-time entrepreneur, like what would be the one kind of like money tip that you guys would each maybe have for them?
Man, I would say live as lean as possible. So work on your expenses up first and try to trim those down. But there's only so much you can do there. I would say that automating your finances and paying yourself first was a big win for me. I read David Bach's Automatic Millionaire when we were engaged, about to get married, or maybe just as we were married.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big game changer for me. And so it was about basically hiding money from yourself for your future. And that goes for an entrepreneur as well. Continue doing that. Find a way to do that. So if you're employed, do that through your employer. But once you go solo, make sure you open up that solo 401k or that SEP IRA and get that money automatically going for your future before you even get a chance to spend it. And I found that when I paid myself first, I saved first, it was more easily just to spend the rest and feel comfortable and free to do that. And so that's kind of the mindset I took in my initial journey toward fixing my finances. And so that's what I always try to tell people to do.
Yeah, I think we're fortunate that we are on the same page for a lot of big issues like
Mhm.
money, faith.
And marry a frugal wife. That helps too.
Spending. Somebody that's like averse to spending money. Like we still rock the 2002 Accord, and the paid off minivan. So good times. But I think, I don't know if it's like a tip yet, but something I would like to improve for myself is tuning back in. So when we had these big goals like paying off our loans and our cars and saving 20% for a house and all that, well, we reached those, after a few years. And then we didn't have anything like enormous, lofty goal. So working towards retirement, but you're chipping away at that too and whatever. But as we've added kids, like I said, we kind of naturally separated into our roles, sort of like you guys too, with the morning and the evening routines, and with me managing the day-to-day chaos of the house. And then I think Philip being the money guy, doing the automating everything and finding the right bank account for us and where to save and how much to save and all that. And if I had to like look up our bank password, I could find it in 10 minutes, but like I would not know how to do that. And so I think being naturally frugal, it doesn't matter that I don't know how much money I can spend, because I'm not going to spend most of it anyway, or I'm going to like return whatever I just bought with my like buyer's remorse, but I think for sure, like I need to tune in a little bit more to what our day-to-day and our big picture finances are, because I just think it could be, not only it could be dangerous, but I think it's also just not fair to Philip totally to be in charge of like the weight of the household that way on his shoulders.
Yeah. And we do good about, annual checkups or 6 months or quarterly, but for the most part, we're not necessarily on those weekly calendar calls. We should probably include some kind of finance element to it. And that's a weak spot for us. We've, got our money luckily to a point to where we're not having to think about it as much. And so naturally, I just think we don't talk about it as much as we should maybe, but at least a check-in or some type of, metrics that we should look at together on a weekly basis would be helpful to include. So
yeah, one of the interesting things we did was I was always the money person and Ariana wasn't. So, and in this, might recommend to people, might not. It's up to you guys. I actually shifted like the budget and the paying of the bills over to her for a period of time. Mm-hmm. And that did a couple things. One, it got her more aware of kind of what was going on and where we were at. But then two, she actually came up with some really creative ways and ideas that I would have never thought about. So like I've kind of taken that back now, but we're now so much more aligned on things because she got that peer in. And then we do our check-ins like monthly. So we reflect on the last month, how do we do on the budget? And we do that personal life and business. And then we also project the budget forward. So it lets us get aligned once a month without having to have her like too deep into most of that.
Yeah, I don't enjoy numbers. I can do it if I have to, but
right. Well, and I think monthly probably is nice because I would say we for sure sync up annually and maybe twice a year. But by that point, I'm just like eyes rolling in the back of my head. Like, I don't know. I don't care. Just take care of it. And, so it would be good to sync up that often.
Yeah. I think it takes a little bit to get there though, because, if you're somebody like me and you just don't like talking about that stuff, it's easy to push it off and be like, no, well, it's fine. It's fine. Well, you can take care of it. But I had to really make that part of like, okay, I need to get better at knowing where we're at, even though it's just not my jam, because it helps him to kind of be able to talk to me about those things. Or when we have a big issue that we need to talk about, I'm not so far out from knowing where we're at that it's like a huge deal. It's like, oh, okay, well, we were kind of aware and this thing happened. So it definitely took a lot of work for me to get to that point, because I would just rather not have to be involved in anything that includes numbers. But obviously that doesn't work in the business either.
Yeah. Well, it's all an evolution. So like people look at our calendar, or like we do an annual meeting, we do a meeting every 90 days, we do it every month. So when we introduce this to people, it sounds overwhelming, but we've evolved this over the years for like what works for us. And then as we work with other entrepreneurs, we've kind of figured out what works for them. So it's not like we just started this system day one. It was an evolution and kind of seeing what works and what didn't. And it's still evolving. It's still a work in progress.
Always.
And as the kids, I think, have gotten older, I've had the brain space to, jump back into some things that I deferred to Philip. And as the kids are getting older, there's more that he is like excited to jump into with them. And so I think that helps us to be on the same page too.
Yeah, it definitely, the seasons of the children definitely has so much of an effect on your personal life, your relationship as a husband and wife, and the businesses themselves. Like, it's just, we've gone through so many changes since they were little, and now they're 6 and 3, and it's like, holy moly, how did we do that back then? Like, it's just, it seems so crazy. But then, of course, I'm sure we'll go through another season. It's going to be like, oh my gosh, how did we do that? So I love that too, because I think that's important to remember. Like, there are going to be times where roles shift, where things are different than you thought they would be. But there are those seasons of life that, kind of once you get out of that, it's going to be different, and it may be better. It may be just different.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. So I think we chatted about a ton of great stuff today, and Tom sort of already got you to give your tips, but they were money tips. So is there anything else that we chatted about today that you want our listeners to kind of take away from your story or your experiences? And they don't have to be money related.
Yeah, well, mine's still somewhat money related. It's just that if you fix your financial life, a lot of freedom and opportunity opens up. And that's what it was for us. While we were dreaming about these ideas and letting those sort of dreams creep into our life, we were fixing our finances at the same time. And that meant getting rid of all our debt, living lean, and saving for our future. And then 3 years later, when it was still seemingly inconvenient or still feeling risky, we were able to make that move. And so even if you're just starting to dream about full-time entrepreneurship, making that leap, just get on those finances, man. Get those fixed as fast as possible. That way you have that ultimate freedom to move and go about your business.
I think we, as a couple, with the businesses, with as our family, I think we are such a work in progress. And I think that is probably just how it is. And then we're figuring out this life with a lot of extra freedom with our time. And I say that, although I know, and you guys for sure know, being both entrepreneurs, like how much work, how many hours you really are putting in. I know you're working like 10 times more than probably, at the corporate gig, but our hours are flexible. And so we are fighting to just be intentional. We're so tired, I think, like with the season that we're in, that it's hard to remember to be intentional. But it's like, okay, he can be home at 3:00 when the kids are done with school some days, and he can take, 1 or 2 kiddos to go do something, or, we can, we don't have to wait just from, 6 to 8 o'clock to have family time. So for us, it's like being intentional, planning and dreaming. But also then I guess probably for me to not beat myself up because it doesn't look a certain way, because it can't. It's so unique to our situation.
I love that. I think that's a great takeaway too. Like it is, everybody's situation is unique. So you don't need to look at other people's situations and think that yours has to look like that, or people are judging you and telling you a certain way that you should do something. It doesn't have to be anything. It's what you make it, and you have the control.
Hopefully. We'll see.
All right, you guys, where is the best place for people to reach out and connect with you if they want to come and chat and say hello?
Yeah, so I've still got the blog going on at ptmoney.com. We've got a couple of podcasts I've done in the past there, one on money stories, one on part-time entrepreneurship. They're archived now, but you can still check those out on iTunes. And then, of course, FinCon. We'd love to meet any digital marketers out there. You don't have to be personal finance geeks like me. You can be an entrepreneur guy like Tom.
Yep.
And Ariana. And come to FinCon and learn about digital marketing, how to create, promote, and profit off of amazing content.
Yeah.
And that's at finconexpo.com.
I'm so excited that I get to come this year because Tom had so much fun last year. And I was like, what the heck, man? But I was actually sick at home on my birthday, so I guess it wouldn't have been good if I was there. You guys, it's been another great episode with Tom and Ariana, your hosts and lifestyle builders. And we want to extend a very, very big thank you to you, PT and Teresa, for coming on and sharing all of your stories and experiences with us today.
Thanks for having us. It was fun.
It's great, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And if this episode doesn't give it to you, I want you guys to remember it's your life, your business, your way. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you know another entrepreneur who may benefit from hearing this show, we would so appreciate you being a good friend and sharing it with them. And just a reminder, as a special offer during this super special Couples in Entrepreneurship Month, we'd like to invite you to get started with your first month of Lifestyle Builders for only $1. Sign up now at tomandariana.com/LBcouples with the promo code LBcouples. Are you a Lifestyle Builders podcast fan? We'd love to hear from you. Head on over to tomandariana.com/iTunes and leave us a review.